wise that will be detrimental to our competitiveness.
In the global village, what are the countries, or I don't know, better we should talk about societies, more likely to be successful in the next future?
Well, right now, I think, the bet that everyone seems to be having is China, isn't it? Everywhere you go, you hear people talking about China and China and China and China. I'm of the opinion that China has an ice cube. And it is arguably the biggest ice cube the world has ever seen. It's huge. But it is nevertheless an ice cube, and it's an ice cube that is placed in a desert. If you consider why China is competitive, I think there are two key reasons. Number one, a huge number of people. I mean, there are so many that they probably don't even have a clue how many they are. And many of them are decently educated. I mean, China churns out twice as many university graduates per year as compared to the United States. And well-educated, historically at least, low salaries. Second reason, the yuan, the currency, which is pegged to the dollar, and the Americans, of course, do not like it because they believe the yuan should absorb some of the competitiveness that China has developed, and the Chinese are refusing. But if you take a look at those two things, if you talk to sensible commentators on the currency, they believe that it should be corrected by something around 20 to 30% to reflect the true realities of competitiveness between China and the rest of the world, and especially the Western world. If you consider the salaries that historically were very, very low in China, if you go to the hotspots on the eastern seaboard of China, those salaries are up by 15-20% per year. So 15-20% plus 20 to 30%, the ice cube is melting. And in 1 year, if the Chinese decide to correct the valuation of the currency, about half of the ice cube would be gone. My bet would be free, open societies. And let me tell you why. I don't think that you can produce something like this, an iPhone, in a society where people are not completely free. Because if you're not completely free, you cannot be creative. And if you cannot be creative, if you cannot collaborate, if you cannot communicate, if you're always scared of someone watching you, you cannot produce innovation. And innovation at the end of the day is what will determine whether or not you will be successful. So ironically, the only institution that we are willing to give to the Chinese for free, in fact, we would probably pay them just to take it, democracy, is the only institution that the Chinese will not imitate, take, steal with pride, call it whatever you want. And ultimately, I think without democracy and true democracy, it's going to be very, very difficult for any country, not only China, any country, to be sustainably competitive. Because without democracy, without freedom, without openness, no innovation.
You hold that getting people to think differently, to feel differently, and to do differently is a key factor for making a positive difference. Should we start changing the educational system, the teaching methods, in order to encourage this process, or at least make them easier and faster?
I think not only in education, I think it has been a system-wide problem, but in education as well, we've had this notion of gap filling. So you come to school and you have a number of minuses, and when you leave school, your teacher is supposed to have transformed those minuses to zeros. So you fill gaps. You don't know. I'll tell you. So now you know. And at best, you leave school as a super zero. Now, I believe that true competitiveness can only be based on your strengths. And really, education should be more about getting the pluses to grow rather than turning the minuses into zeros. Unfortunately, I was born with my left foot on my right leg. I can't play football. I'm terrible. I'm beyond terrible. I managed to kick a ball 3 times once, but not even 200 years of practice with Barcelona, the best football team in the world right now, would help. I mean, Pep Guardiola wouldn't feature me in a single game. But I'm also pretty sure that even if Leo Messi spent 200 years trying to write a management book, he wouldn't be invited by you guys and sit here and do an interview on management. I mean, you would be very happy to get him here, I guess, talking about football. But we are good at different things, and I think to a much greater extent our educational system needs to acknowledge that. Instead of helping people with their weaknesses, we should put more effort when it comes to helping people leverage their strengths.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question about a Galician-based company, that is Zara. You usually talk about this company when you explain your vision about innovative and competitive companies. What is the most striking for you about this firm?
Maybe I'm biased here, I'm Swedish, so one of the main competitors of Zara, of course, is H&M. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of believing that Zara and H&M are very similar when it comes to their strategy. And for sure, they are both incredibly fit companies. They may not be as sexy as some of the Italians, Prada and Gucci and all of that stuff, but very, very fit, very well adapted to the current world of business with cutthroat competition and markets. But the business models of Zara and H&M are quite different, probably, at least in part, because Zara started out as a Spanish company manufacturing in Spain, and I think that trait of a business model early on led Zara to focus more on speed and flexibility, whereas H&M, because, I mean, you couldn't manufacture clothes in Sweden because the salaries were too high, already from the start used this sourcing strategy where a lot of the clothes would come in the beginning from Southern Europe and then from other parts of the world. And Zara is a lot more flexible, a lot speedier than H&M, but H&M on the other hand has lower costs. So for me it's kind of interesting to see two companies that on the surface look very similar, but then when you start digging and sort of going into the depths of it all, they're actually pretty different, strategically and also organizationally and from a management point of view.
Okay, just for finishing, can you tell us something about your current work? I mean, are you working in a new book or?
I am. It has a provisional sort of title, which is Open. And could be interpreted in many different ways, but it's a book that will summarize some of the stuff that we've been talking about now, but also move beyond that in terms of talking about how to build a truly open society, open companies, open strategy, open leadership, etc., etc. So I'm looking forward to it. I enjoy writing. It's a creative process.
Okay. Well, Mr. Ridderstrale, thank you for being here with us, sharing your opinions, and well, good luck with your projects in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.